My name is ParkerCastagnetto, and my paper is The Misperception of Racial Economic Inequality by multiple authors. Next slide. The main thoughts on this paper is that the U.S. as a whole believes that uh, we are more equal than we actually are, particularly the wealth gap between African Americans and the white Americans. That everyone believes that that gap is so much closer and it's so much more equal than where we really are. And they emphasize the effects of this thinking long term. Next slide. They show multiple studies. The first one I want to talk about is a study that these authors did not do, but they use this as the preface for this. Basically, what it shows is they split up wealth into 5 different categories: benefits, college wages, high school wages, wealth, and income. They get three different studies. Everyone's random sample, doesn't matter race, anything like that. And they just ask if a white person has 100 units of each of those categories: benefits, wealth, whatever. They have 100 of those. What is the African American's number compared to that white person's 100? As you can see in those 3 different studies, it's all between 20 and 40-ish, where they believe that no, it's not completely equal, 40 to 100, but it's much more equal than where we've been in the past. If you look at the far right bar on each section, the black, you can see that none of them are even over 10, where the actual number is so much lower than people think, showing that the African American white population is not equal at all. Next slide. The next study that the authors did themselves and published this is basically they sat down with a room of white people, multiple, and they said, if at your job you make $100, what is the average black person at your job? What do they make compared to your 100? You can see that the dots with the lines on top and bottom, for accuracy's sake, those are much higher than the ones with just the diamonds. This is believed by the authors that because the test subjects were asked to think of specific people that they know, associates, peers, someone with the same job title as them, they believe that this also pushed it a little bit up because someone was thinking about someone. These people were thinking about someone, and because they had the same title, same ink, same education, something like that, they pushed it a little bit higher because they believe that they should be equal if they had the same title. You can see that the more education someone had, from less than high school to post grad, the more equal they did become. But the significant gap between perceived and actual, and then the bigger gap between the white $100 to the even post grad $25. Next slide. The third study is essentially the exact same as the second study, but they added in 2 more ethnicities inside of the United States. One, because they wanted to see if this wealth gap was just between white and the African American, and what are the gaps with these others. So the other 2 they added were the Asian American and the Latin American economic gaps. So they did the same thing. They said, white person, you make $100. What does this Asian American person with the same job as you, what do they make? What does this Latin person with the same job as you, what do they make? And then the African number. As you can see here, the Asian American perceived and actual are very close together, but in just a little bit below the $100 white mark. This is believed by, the authors believe that this is due to stereotypes inside our society about Asians being very hard workers and very smart people. That does push the perceived and the actual up a lot higher. We can see that the perceived in the Latin American population is lower than Asian and the black communities, and this is believed to be the social stereotypes of the fact that so many Latin populations are coming through the southern border to find work, and the stereotypes that come from that. as we can see that their actual is a little bit higher than the African American income, though. Again, perceived dot, bars on top and bottom, actual is just the dot. Next slide. The authors try to think of a couple ideas why the gap is so much different than where it actually is. And a couple reasonings they have is people typically do the easier thing over the right thing. Not because they're trying to think of, this is wrong, I'm going to go this way because it's wrong, but because people are people and they're trying to take advantage of where they're at. Typically, a white person is going to have a couple more educational or business opportunities that they're going to take advantage of. And sometimes that does hinder or stop an African American or a Latin American person from achieving those same things, just because a white person maybe comes into a better family or has an opportunity that a black person just doesn't have, and that stops them. Another reason they think the gap is bigger than what people believe is people actually just assume it's equal. If you ask someone, like in study 2 or 3, we talked about, if someone asks you, hey, this person has the same job as you, same education, same production, everything's the same. The only difference between the two of you is one's white and one's black. Who makes more money? What did each person make? The answer typically is going to be it's the same, because most people don't look at color. They just see equal, same numbers, same job time, same education. They deserve to be paid the same. No one's thinking about this anymore, and this is why these authors decided to bring this to light. Just because people are genuinely good people, and they're not thinking, well, he's black, he deserves less than me. Next slide. They then list out some ways that what we can do and what the authors can do to shed light on this huge gap between perceived and actual wealth gaps, and then what we can do to help bring that actually closer, what we can do to make them more equal, not just believe to be more equal. The first one they want to do is they want to communicate. They want to show the actual difference between the white wealth, the Asian wealth, the African American wealth, and the Latin wealth. They do understand that this needs to have more research done to provide the right way. They just throw out a couple of ways, and they understand that if we just come out and say, look, white people make more than black people, we need to change that. We're going to have some backlash from the white population being, one, I don't want to lose money, and that's not fair, I've worked hard, or stuff like that, and they're going to fight those laws to come into place. But then you also have the African American and the Latin and the Asian populations where they believe that they've worked hard and they deserve that too, and they're being snubbed. So there could be riots, backlash, and a lot of civil unrest. So they want to find ways to bring this about peacefully and make everything more equal without causing anything. One way they believe they could bring this up and have a quiet equalization of everything is to put financial literacy and make that a priority in schools. They feel like the financial literacy of the African and the Latin population is not as high as the white American population, and that if these people understood wealth and how to accumulate wealth and working hard and savings and stuff like that, that equality will be so much more obtainable than where we are right now. They also thought of some race-neutral approaches, where if they can start bills and not talk about African Americans need this, and white people need to do this, and Latin Americans need to do this, or we're doing this for the Asian community. If we do these things without bringing anything up, we should be able to make everything more equal. But they do understand that if we do this where we don't bring up the race gap and we just start making laws to try to even the gap without letting anyone know, we're not actually communicating the actual difference. So no one's going to actually understand why we're doing this, because everyone thinks the gap's the same. And if we don't talk about it, and if we just try to do it, this thought process of it being equal never goes away. So they're trying to think of multiple ways, and they did say that more research needs to be done to find the right way to communicate this. If you have any questions, throw them in the Dropbox. Thank you.